welcome to the Room of Requirement. I'm going to be covering the Talmud. I'll be explaining it, the hidden foundation behind Kabbalah. I would suggest watching my Sefer Yetzirah video, my Kabbalah video, and the Tree of Life, and put all these together. I'm actually creating a course on Kabbalah that's going to include all the videos on Kabbalah. So as they come out, those will get added to the course playlist for everyone to watch all at once if you want to. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. Among the most influential works in Jewish history, few are as important or as misunderstood as the Talmud. While many students of mysticism are familiar with the Torah, the Tree of Life, the Zohar, and the mysteries of Kabbalah, far fewer understand the role that the Talmud played in shaping Jewish thought and preserving the wisdom that eventually gave rise to Jewish mysticism itself. To some, the Talmud appears to be merely a collection of religious laws. To others, it is an enormous legal text filled with debates and technical discussions. While these descriptions contain some truth, they barely capture the significance of this remarkable work. The Talmud is not simply a book. It is civilization's ongoing conversation about truth, ethics, spirituality, law, human nature, and the relationship between humanity and the divine. For nearly 2,000 years, Jewish scholars, rabbis, philosophers, mystics, and spiritual seekers have devoted their lives to studying the Talmud. Its influence extends far beyond religion and has shaped Jewish culture, education, philosophy, and even the intellectual foundations from which Kabbalah would later emerge. To understand Jewish mysticism fully, one must first understand the world that produced it. That world is preserved within the pages of the Talmud. The word Talmud comes from the Hebrew root meaning to study, to learn, or instruction. This is important because the Talmud is not intended to be read passively. It is meant to be studied, questioned, debated, discussed, and wrestled with. Unlike many religious texts that present fixed answers, the Talmud often presents multiple viewpoints side by side. Its purpose is not simply to provide conclusions, but to teach a method of inquiry. Students are encouraged to think critically, examine assumptions, and engage deeply with ideas. In this sense, the Talmud is less a book and more of a living process of learning. To understand the Talmud, we must first understand the distinction between the written Torah and the oral Torah. The written Torah consists of the first 5 books traditionally attributed to Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These texts form the foundation of Jewish scripture. According to Jewish tradition, however, Moses received not only the written Torah, but also the oral Torah, a body of explanations, interpretations, and the teachings necessary for understanding and applying the written text. For centuries, the oral Torah was transmitted from teacher to student through direct instruction. As generations passed and circumstances changed, concerns arose that these teachings might be lost. In response, scholars began recording and preserving the oral traditions that would eventually become the Talmud. The Talmud emerged gradually over several centuries. Following the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in 70 CE, Jewish communities faced enormous challenges. Without the temple as the center of religious life, new ways of preserving tradition became necessary. Rabbinical scholars began collecting, organizing, and discussing teachings that had been previously transmitted orally. Around 200 CE, Rabbi Judah ha-Nasi compiled a work known as the Mishnah. The Mishnah organized centuries of oral teachings into a structured collection covering law, ethics, ritual practice, and daily life. Over the following centuries, scholars continued discussing, analyzing, debating, and expanding upon the Mishnah. These discussions became known as Gemara. Together, the Mishnah and the Gemara form what we call the Talmud. Many people are surprised to learn that there is not one, but 2 Talmuds. The Jerusalem Talmud was compiled in the land of Israel and completed around the 4th century. The Babylonian Talmud was compiled in Babylonia and completed around the 5th or 6th century. Although both are important, the Babylonian Talmud became the more influential and authoritative of the two. When people refer to the Talmud, they are usually referring to the Babylonian Talmud. Its influence on Jewish thought is difficult to overstate. One of the first things that astonishes new students is the sheer size of the Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud contains approximately 2.7 million words and fills over 2,700 double-sided pages in traditional editions. Modern printed editions commonly occupy 20 or more large volumes. A person studying a single page every day follows a practice known as daf yomi. Even at this pace, it takes approximately 7.5 years to complete the entire Talmud. Its immense size reflects centuries of accumulated wisdom, discussion, and scholarship. The Talmud is not a book one simply reads from beginning to end. It is a lifelong field of study. One of the most unique aspects of the Talmud is its structure. A typical page contains multiple layers of commentary surrounding a central text. Discussions branch outward into further discussions which generate additional interpretations and responses. Reading the Talmud can feel like entering an ongoing conversation that spans centuries. Different voices speak across time. Questions generate new questions, and debates lead to deeper understanding. Rather than presenting a single perspective, the Talmud preserves the complexity of human inquiry itself. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about the Talmud is that disagreement is not viewed as a weakness. Multiple viewpoints are often preserved side by side. Arguments are recorded even when no final answer is reached. The goal is not always certainty. The goal is understanding. And the Talmud teaches that truth is often approached through dialogue, inquiry, and thoughtful examination, rather through unquestioning acceptance. The spirit of inquiry became one of the defining characteristics of Jewish intellectual and spiritual life. One of the most common misconceptions about the Talmud is that it is simply a book of religious laws. While legal discussions certainly form a significant portion of the text, the Talmud contains far more than rules and regulations. Within its pages are discussions on ethics, philosophy, theology, history, agriculture, business, marriage, education, psychology, dreams, angels, medicine, spirituality, and human behavior. The Talmud attempts to explore virtually every aspect of life and ask how wisdom can be applied within each circumstance. For this reason, many scholars regard it as one of the most comprehensive explorations of human existence ever compiled. A large portion of the Talmud focuses upon what is known as halakha, often translated as Jewish law. However, these laws are not merely legal regulations in a modern sense. They are intended to transform ordinary life into conscious spiritual practice. Every action, no matter how small, is viewed as an opportunity to align oneself with higher principles. The Talmud teaches that spirituality is not confined to temples, rituals, or moments of prayer. Instead, spiritual development occurs through daily choice, ethical conduct, relationships, work, speech, and responsibility. In this way, the Talmud seeks to bring sacred awareness into every aspect of life. Beyond legal discussions, the Talmud contains an extraordinary body of ethical teachings. The rabbis were deeply concerned with questions of character, integrity, justice, compassion, humility, and personal responsibility. They understood the spiritual growth is impossible without moral development. Many of the teachings found within the Talmud focus on how individuals should treat one another. Honesty, kindness, generosity, patience, forgiveness, and respect for others are recurring themes throughout the text. The rabbis repeatedly emphasize that wisdom is not measured solely by knowledge, but by how one lives. In this sense, the Talmud functions as a guide for character development. It seeks not merely to inform the mind, but to refine the individual. One of the most distinctive features of the Talmud is its approach to disagreement. Unlike many traditions that seek definitive answers, the Talmud often preserves multiple viewpoints side by side. Rabbis debate, challenge one another, ask questions, propose interpretations, and explore alternative possibilities. This approach reflects a profound belief that truth is often discovered through dialogue rather than dogma. The Talmud teaches that questioning is not a threat to wisdom, but a pathway towards it. Students are encouraged to think critically, examine assumptions, and participate actively in the search for understanding. For this reason, studying the Talmud is often described as joining a conversation that has been unfolding for nearly 2,000 years. Although the Talmud contains extensive legal discussions, it is also filled with stories, parables, and narratives. These stories often communicate profound spiritual lessons through memorable characters and situations. The rabbis understood that stories can sometimes reveal truths that logic alone cannot convey. Through parables, moral dilemmas, and symbolic narratives, the Talmud explores the complexity of human nature, the challenges of ethical decision-making, and the mysteries of the human condition. Many of these stories remain widely studied because they continue to offer insight into life, relationships, suffering, and spiritual growth. The Talmud preserves the teachings of some of the greatest scholars and spiritual teachers in Jewish history. Figures such as Rabbi Akiva, Hillel the Elder, Shammai, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yohanan, and many others appear throughout its pages. These individuals were not merely legal scholars. They were philosophers, teachers, mystics, and seekers of wisdom who devoted their lives to understanding the relationship between humanity and the divine. Their discussions reveal remarkable intellectual depth, but also profound humility. Many of the greatest rabbis recorded in the Talmud openly acknowledged uncertainty, changed their positions, and remained committed to learning throughout their lives. Although the Talmud is not primarily a mystical text, it contains numerous pages that hint at deeper spiritual realities. Discussions concerning angels, heavenly realms, visions, dreams, divine encounters, and the mysteries of creation appear throughout the text. Certain passages preserve remnants of the early mystical traditions that would later evolve into Merkava mysticism and eventually Kabbalah. References to Ezekiel's vision of the divine chariot, heavenly ascents, angelic hierarchies, and hidden dimensions of reality can all be found within the Talmudic tradition. These mystical elements remind us that rabbis were concerned not only with practical life, but also with the profound mysteries of existence. The Talmud contains numerous discussions concerning angels and celestial beings. Angels are presented not merely as supernatural figures, but as agents of divine intelligence operating throughout creation. Different angels fulfill different roles, carrying out divine purposes within both the spiritual and material worlds. The rabbis explored questions concerning the nature of angels, their relationship to humanity, and their place within the cosmic order. These discussions help establish many of the foundations upon which later Jewish angelology and Kabbalah would build. The Talmud places significant importance upon dreams. While not every dream is considered meaningful, many passages suggest that dreams can provide insight into the deeper workings of the soul. The rabbis viewed dreams as occupying a unique space between the physical and spiritual worlds. They recognize that dreams often communicate through symbols rather than direct language and may reveal hidden dimensions of consciousness. These discussions would later influence both Jewish mysticism and various esoteric traditions concerned with symbolic interpretation and inner development. To understand Kabbalah, it is important to recognize that it did not emerge in isolation. The mystical traditions of Judaism developed within the intellectual environment created by centuries of Talmudic study. The habit of searching beneath the surface of Scripture, exploring multiple layers of meaning, debating interpretations, and seeking hidden truths all help prepare the ground for Kabbalistic thought. The Kabbalists inherited the intellectual discipline of the Talmud while directing their attention toward the deeper mysteries of creation, consciousness, divine emanation, and spiritual transformation. Without the culture of inquiry preserved within the Talmud, the later flowering of Kabbalah may never have occurred. Although written centuries ago, many of the Talmud's teachings remain remarkably relevant. The text continually emphasizes humility, responsibility, lifelong learning, ethical behavior, compassion, and thought reflection. It reminds us that wisdom is not merely the accumulation of information, but the ability to live well. The Talmud encourages individuals to ask questions, remain open to learning, examine their assumptions, and treat others with dignity. In a world increasingly driven by certainty and division, its commitment to dialogue and thoughtful inquiry remains surprisingly modern. Perhaps one of its most enduring lessons is that growth occurs not when we believe we have all the answers, but when we remain willing to continue asking meaningful questions. Few books in human history have exercised the influence of the Talmud. For nearly 2,000 years, it has served as one of the central foundations of Jewish civilization, shaping law, ethics, education, philosophy, spirituality, and community life. Entire generations of scholars have devoted themselves to studying its pages, preserving not only its teachings, but also its unique approach to learning, inquiry, and the search for truth. Unlike many ancient texts that remain frozen in the past, the Talmud continues to actively be studied throughout the world today. Its discussions remain relevant because they address timeless questions concerning justice, responsibility, wisdom, human nature, and the challenges of living a meaningful life. In many ways, the Talmud is not simply a historical document, but a living tradition that continues to evolve through study and interpretation. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Talmud is that it was never intended to be mastered quickly. Many scholars spend decades studying its teachings, and even the most learned rabbis often describe themselves as lifelong students. Part of the reason lies in the immense scope of the work itself. With thousands of pages containing centuries of discussion, commentary, and debate, the Talmud offers an almost inexhaustible field of exploration. Yet its depth extends far beyond its size. A single passage may generate countless interpretations, each revealing new layers of meaning. The Talmud teaches that wisdom is not a destination, but a process. The goal is not merely to accumulate knowledge, but to continually refine one's understanding. Every question opens the door to deeper questions. Every answer reveals new mysteries. And in this way, the study of the Talmud becomes a lifelong journey rather than a completed task. Throughout history, Jewish communities experienced exile, persecution, displacement, and tremendous cultural change. Empires rose and fell, kingdoms disappeared, entire civilizations vanished, yet the Talmud endured. One reason for its survival is that it became a portable homeland of knowledge. Even when physical centers of Jewish life were destroyed, the wisdom preserved within the Talmud could travel with people who studied it. It provided continuity across generations and helped preserve a shared identity regardless of geography. The Talmud became more than a collection of teachings. It became a vessel through which the entire civilization carried its memory, values, traditions, and wisdom across centuries. Although Kabbalah and the Talmud are often viewed as separate traditions, they are deeply interconnected. The Kabbalists inherited much of the intellectual discipline, interpretive methods, and reverence for sacred texts that were cultivated through centuries of Talmudic study. The habit of examining multiple layers of meaning, searching beneath the surface of Scripture, and exploring hidden dimensions of truth all emerged from the environment of the Talmud helped create. When the Kabbalists later developed teachings concerning divine emanation, the tree of life, angelic hierarchies, and mystical ascent, they did so within a culture already shaped by generations of careful study and spiritual inquiry. The Talmud provided the soil from which the flowering of Kabbalah could emerge. Although primarily associated with Judaism, the influence of the Talmud extends beyond Jewish communities. Its methods of analysis, debate, interpretation, and logical reasoning have attracted the attention of philosophers, legal scholars, theologians, and educators for centuries. The Talmud demonstrates a unique way of approaching knowledge. Rather than seeking simplistic answers, it embraces complexity. Rather than suppressing disagreement, it preserves multiple viewpoints. Rather than discouraging questions, it encourages them. This approach has influenced not only religious scholarship, but broader discussions concerning law, ethics, education, and critical thinking. Its legacy reminds us that wisdom often emerges through dialogue rather than certainty. While many people think of the Talmud as an intellectual work, traditional students often view its study as a spiritual practice. The act of wrestling with difficult questions, refining one's understanding, and engaging with sacred wisdom becomes a form of inner development. The Talmud teaches patience, humility, discipline, and intellectual honesty. It requires the student to listen carefully, think deeply, and remain open to perspectives different from their own. In doing so, it cultivates qualities that are essentially not only for scholarship, but for spiritual growth. The rabbis understood that transformation occurs not merely through acquiring information, but through becoming the kind of person capable of receiving wisdom. Perhaps the greatest wonder of the Talmud is that it preserves the voices of countless individuals engaged in an ongoing search for truth. Across its pages, we encounter generations of scholars asking questions, debating ideas, challenging assumptions, and striving to understand both humanity and the divine. These voices speak across centuries. Their concerns often feel surprisingly familiar. They wrestle with justice, suffering, ethics, responsibility, relationships, community, meaning, and spiritual purpose. Though separated from us by time, they remain connected through the universal human desire to understand life more deeply. Reading the Talmud can feel like entering a conversation that truly never ended. The questions asked centuries ago continue to be asked today, and the search continues, the dialogue continues, and the pursuit of wisdom continues. One of the reasons the Talmud has endured for nearly 2 millennia is that it refuses to reduce reality to simple answers. Instead, it invites the reader into a process of continual exploration. It recognizes that life is complex and that truth often possesses many dimensions and that wisdom requires both humility and perseverance. The Talmud does not ask us merely to memorize its teachings. It asks us to think. It asks us to question, and it asks us to engage. It asks us to participate in the search for understanding. In a world that often rewards certainty, the Talmud reminds us of the value of inquiry. In a world that often encourages quick conclusions, it reminds us of the importance of careful reflection. In a world that frequently divides people into opposing camps, it demonstrates how disagreement can become a pathway toward deeper understanding rather than conflict. When we step back and consider the scope of the Talmud, its achievement becomes almost unimaginable. Thousands of pages, hundreds of scholars, centuries of discussions, countless questions, interpretations, debates, and insights woven together in a single living tradition. Few works in human history have preserved the intellectual and spiritual life of a civilization so completely. Few texts have sustained relevancy for so long. Fewer still continue to inspire active study after nearly 2,000 years. The Talmud stands as a monument to humanity's enduring search for wisdom. It reminds us that the knowledge is not merely something that we process, but something we pursue. It teaches that understanding grows through conversation, that truth is often discovered through inquiry, and that the deepest questions are worthy of a lifetime of contemplation. To encounter the Talmud is to encounter one of the greatest achievements of human thought. Its pages reveal not only what generations of scholars believed and how they learned, questioned, reasoned, and sought wisdom. In doing so, the Talmud becomes more than a book. It becomes a testament to the human spirit's relentless desire to understand itself, the world, and the divine. The Talmud stands as one of the most influential works in the history of Judaism and one of the greatest collections of wisdom ever assembled. More than a legal text, more than a historical record, and more than a religious commentary, it represents a living conversation about what it means to live thoughtfully, ethically, and spiritually. Through its pages, we encounter generations of scholars who refuse to stop asking questions, We witness a tradition that values inquiry as much as answers, understanding as much as certainty, and wisdom as much as knowledge. We discover a vision of learning not as a destination but a lifelong journey. And for the student of mysticism, the Talmud provides the intellectual foundation upon which later traditions such as Kabbalah would be built. For the philosopher, it offers a remarkable model of critical thought and dialogue. For the spiritual seeker, it serves as a reminder that growth often begins with a question rather than an answer. Whether approached as history, philosophy, spirituality, ethics, or sacred literature, the Talmud remains one of humanity's most extraordinary achievements. It invites us to participate in the conversation that has continued for nearly 2,000 years and reminds us that the pursuit of wisdom is among the highest callings of the human soul. And perhaps that is the Talmud's greatest lesson, that the search for truth is never truly finished, and that each generation receives the conversation, contributions, its voice, and passes it forward. In that way, the wisdom lives on and the dialogue continues. Okay, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. I'm going to be doing the Torah next after this one. I'm also going to be covering egregores, Enochian magic, the Arbitel, the Picatrix, Lesser Key of Solomon, and the Kabbalion. Okay, I will see you guys next time. Thanks for being here. Bye.